Welcome back. You're watching Newsx and we're looking at the India and EU trade deal. India and the European Union have sealed the much awaited free trade deal. The announcement for which will be made today at the 16th India-EU Summit in New Delhi in the presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The official signing of the FTA will take place in about 6 months, since it would have to go through legal scrubbing of the text first. Further, the deal will come into effect sometime next year. The Trade Pact is of major significance as it will impact economies that together represent nearly 2 billion people. The goal is to increase trade between India and the EU at a time when global trade is under pressure, especially due to the US tariffs. Let's in fact take a look at the existing trade between India and the European Union. So let's look at what we have exactly right now between both the European Union and India, and let's see what kind of changes this will actually bring with this historic trade deal. So let's look at India-EU trade. The total trade that we're talking about between India and the EU stands at $136.53 billion. So that's the staggering number already. India and the EU have a good trade going on right now, approximately $136.53 billion. And let's look at India's exports to the EU, because that's how we will come to know how much we are exporting and how much we can expect to change in this front. So this is $75.85 billion. So a very balanced trade, and that is why this is very important, because both the blocks have a very balanced trade. India's exports to EU are around $75 billion and EU's export to India stand at $60.68 billion. And remember that these figures are based on 2024-25 that financial year, and this is what the trade picture looks like. The exports of both the countries are around 60% for both of them. Now let's look at India's primary exports to the EU. So when we are talking about India exporting stuff to the EU, these are the main ingredients that we are talking about. Petroleum products, we do that. We also export electronics, which includes smartphones. We have textiles. That's there is a lot of discussion regarding textiles between this India-EU trade, because it's a very labor-intensive sector, and India will seek to benefit in this. Then we have machinery, we have organic chemicals, we have iron and steel, gems and jewelry as well that we export. Pharmaceuticals also form a major part over here, automotive components and alcohol. So this is what our export basket looks like to the European Union. Now all these things are very important, and India might look at increasing the exports to the EU by a large number, and also how they can increase this going forward to help our economy. Now let's look at some other imports that India has. India's main imports from the EU, it's machinery. So we import a lot of machinery from the EU. We also import aircraft and aircraft parts from the EU. We have electronics that we import, medical devices, very important for India. Scientific instruments also form a part of our import basket. We're looking at rough diamonds, which is something that India imports from the EU, chemicals, plastics, automobiles. So in this sector and services trade, so even in automobiles, when we are talking about EU, will be looking at exporting a lot more. We have a lot of major automobile manufacturers in the EU, and they will look to expand their trade as well to India. So this actually forms India's main imports from the EU. This is our import basket that we're talking about. And let's look at India's services exports to the EU, because remember that we are also looking at a mobility framework in the apart from the free trade agreement. So let's look at what services we export to the EU. Business services, we give that as well. Information technology services, India is known for leading the IT sector, and this is a service that India actually provides to the EU as well. Telecommunication services also, and transport services. So these are the services sector that we are seeing, where India is exporting all these services that they can provide to the EU. And when we are looking at the free trade agreement, we are looking at the mobility framework as well, that will help mobilization of the workforce between both the blocks here. So we are looking at business, IT, telecommunication and transportation services to be in fact increased. Let's in fact understand how this actually helps India and how this will help the European Union as well, because this has been pegged as the mother of all deals as well. In fact, let me go across to Dr. Sharat Kohli, senior economist, who is also joining us on the broadcast to help us understand how big of a deal this is. Thank you so much, Dr. Kohli, for joining us on the broadcast. A very good morning to you. So, Dr. Kohli, when we're looking at the trade between both these countries, obviously it's a very balanced sheet that we're looking at, and now with this free trade agreement almost coming to conclusion, obviously it will be implemented, signed after 6 months, after all the legal paperwork, and then implemented a year later. But we are going to obviously look at all of this expanding, that trade that we are talking about between both the blocks.
Good morning, Shivani, to you and Newsx viewers. Indeed, it's going to be a landmark deal. There's no doubt about it. Let's understand how this is going to benefit, because it's not that we are not trading with the EU until now. We are trading, and we've been trading for a very long time. And this particular deal has been in discussion for 19 years now. So the way it helps is that the European market, in terms of most of these goods which you named just now, textiles, chemicals, leather, footwear, gems and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So there's a long list. So they were primarily being dominated by China. So China was one of the biggest exporters, or shall I say Europe was, huge import was happening from China. The largest, in fact, by far. So how this is going to help is that Indian products and Chinese products would compete in the European markets. And I spoke to a lot of importers in Europe, in France, in Germany, in Poland, Belgium, in a lot of other Luxembourg, a lot of other places. And they told me that Indian goods are good. We don't want to consume, but the problem is the pricing. We're getting them cheaper from China. And when I deep dive into the whole mathematics, I found that it was the duties which were taking away the competitiveness of Indian goods. So I think that is where we are going to score. These goods were already being there. Some of the importers were importing. It's not that they were not importing. Now they're going to become more competitive. The prices are going to compete with the Chinese goods. And Europe did want to decouple with China. Europe did want to, find an alternate to China, because it was getting increasingly heavily dependent on China. So Indian goods will suddenly find itself, we need to wait for the announcement of the deal, but then it is expected that more than 90% of the goods will become duty-free, which means that we will now be able to compete with China on all these items which you listed out. So this is going to increase our orders as far as the importers in Europe are concerned. 27 nations at one go. This is why it is being called as mother of all deals. EU, $186 to $188 billion of bilateral trade we have currently. My own estimation says over the next 3 years, we should be able to take it to about $225 to $250 billion in terms of bilateral trade. I think it's mutually beneficial for Europe. They will not be able to find a market as big as India. We have a middle class of about 65 to 70 crores. If we add the neo middle class, which had been added out of the multidimensional poverty index when 25 crore people came out, plus the old middle class, It's a huge market. Europe, most of the European countries, Shivani, at this point are not doing very well in terms of their economies. They are either in recession or they are barely above the zero mark. So it's a very precarious situation. Add to that the American onslaught of tariffs. So I think we should all thank President Trump for that, because he's ended up in huddling up the countries together. We're getting together now. The deals are happening faster. What was stuck for 19 years is going to happen hopefully today. And we need to wait for the announcements to find out the nitty-gritties of the deal. But overall, a win-win situation for both the parties, Shivani.
Right, Dr. Kohli. Apart from the free trade agreements, there are also talks about a mobility framework. There are also talks about a very strategic defense cooperation as well between both the countries, sir.
Absolutely. Because the great American dream of Indian tech and other professionals is almost shattered now with the immigration restrictions coming up in America. H-1B restrictions. It's not easy now for Indian tech professionals and other professionals to move around. I mean, America has been launching very, very selfish policies. So I think India will find an alternate destination, I would say. Europe has got tremendous potential. There are a lot of European countries which need trained, skilled Indian manpower, which is going to create innovation the way it has done in America. And that innovation will now come to Europe, and Europe will always welcome such professionals who add value to their economy. And of course, a lot of other defense and other cooperation is going to happen. Another aspect I would like to touch upon, Shivani, is education. Because the American universities, thanks to President Trump's policies, there have been restrictions on admissions in so many colleges and universities across the United States. And Europe provides some great potential in terms of education. There are a lot of great educational institutions in Europe where Indian students can now aim at, instead of going to America. So I think overall, as I said, it's going to open a whole vista of opportunities, whether for students or for professionals or for businessmen or for exporters. We're going to see cross-border investments happening, Shivani. You'll find a lot of European companies coming to India to explore Indian markets, to avail the benefit which India provides today of its huge economic growth. India is world's growth engine, and I think IMF and the World Bank have certified that. So I think we are excited about the deal, but I find the European contingent is equally or more excited about the whole deal, Shivani.
Right. And Dr. Kohli, if I can request